Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, corruption is at the top of the political agenda in Kenya as the banks wade into an investigation into the alleged theft of 80 million euros of public money by dozens of civil servants. Campaigners calling for nationwide demonstrations against the scale of government graft. Also, representatives from Libya's rival factions agree to hold elections on December the 10th. Leaders from the fractured nation were in Paris for peace talks aimed at ending 7 years of conflict. And across much of Africa, colonialism remains a sensitive subject. In St. Louis, Senegal, campaigners want the statue of French colonial general Louis Faidherbe gone. We take a closer look. But first, Kenya's central bank said that it is working with police in an investigation into the theft of over 80 million euros in public money. Dozens of civil servants were charged with graft on Tuesday, but despite the high-profile case, many Kenyans remain sceptical that it will do much in terms of tackling widespread corruption long seen in government institutions.
Stepping up anti-corruption efforts. Kenya's top prosecutor said the charges brought against more than 50 civil servants on Tuesday were only the first step.
In addition to prosecution, we are looking at recovering the proceeds of crime, as well as establishing the tax status of the companies and individuals involved in the crimes. In the meantime, several bank accounts that the funds were channeled through have been frozen.
The prosecution said the missing funds had been stolen mainly through fictitious invoices and that it would look into the alleged role of banks in facilitating these illegal transactions. The probe has been hailed as a rare move by Kenyan authorities to address the country's rampant corruption problem, yet many Kenyans have expressed doubts on whether the real culprits would be brought to justice.
We have seen petty offenders like people who steal chicken here and there. They have been sentenced to 15 years in jail. But the people who disappear with the billions of shillings are driving Range Rovers and living in very posh areas. Nothing is done.
It's a mind game. We won't benefit in any way. It's a lost cause. They should stop taking us for a ride.
Kenyan media have reported on more than a dozen corruption scandals involving state officials since Uhuru Kenyatta was elected president in 2013. During his campaign, Kenyatta had pledged to stamp out corruption, yet no high-profile graft-related convictions have occurred since he took office.
Well, representatives from most of Libya's rival factions have agreed to hold elections on December the 10th. Leaders from the fractured nation were in Paris for peace talks aimed at ending 7 years of conflict. Two of the men who've settled on a political roadmap for the country are longtime rivals Khalifa Haftar and Fayez al-Sarraj. Our Brian Quinn tells us more.
On the left, Khalifa Haftar. On the right, Fayez al-Sarraj. Two bitter rivals brought together in Paris. The 74-year-old Field Marshal Haftar is the strongman of eastern Libya. In 1969, he took part in the coup that brought Muammar Gaddafi to power. A split with the dictator saw him exiled to America, but he returned in 2011 to take part in the uprising that would topple Gaddafi. Commander-in-chief of the Libyan National Army, today he has tens of thousands of soldiers under him. Since 2016, he's controlled 5 of the country's 6 principal oil terminals, 85% of Libya's reserves. He's racked up military gains and liberated Benghazi from jihadis, including the Islamic State group. Several weeks ago, he announced the start of the final battle for Derna, also in the hands of Islamist militants.
On this holiday, we proclaim that 0 hour for the liberation of Derna has arrived.
Haftar has the support, open or tacit, of several Gulf states, the U.S., and France. But officially, according to the international community and the UN, Libya's true leader is Fayez al-Sarraj, head of the interim government of national accord in Tripoli. Since his nomination just over a year ago, he's made it his mission to reconcile the country and pacify the capital.
We want to find common ground between all parties to the conflict and put an end to the suffering. We need to implement all initiatives for this objective.
A year ago, al-Sarraj had hoped to be able to organize presidential and legislative elections by spring 2018. Those elections now scheduled for December.
On Tuesday, Tunisia saw its first rights trials since the 2011 revolution. The first round of cases heard by the Truth and Dignity Commission saw 14 former officials, including ousted former dictator Zine El Abidine Ben Ali. Many cases go back more than 50 years and involve torture and other forms of abuse. Our correspondents report from the town of Gabes.
Here in front of the courthouse in the city of Gabes, human rights organizations have gathered and families of the victims of state abuse and repression for many decades have gathered for the case, the first case that has been referred to court by Tunisia's Transitional Justice Authority, the Truth and Dignity Commission, which has been looking into cases over the last 4 years. This particular case is emblematic of some of the victims. The victim today is Kamel Matmati, who in 1991 was subjected to enforced disappearance and torture. Some of those accused today include the former Minister of Interior and other high-level officials.
I want to know who killed him, who attacked him, who tortured him.
Our first demand is the truth. Truth will give us comfort and allow us to move forward in a stable way. It will allow us to turn a new page in our history.
This process is an important step for transitional justice in Tunisia and for justice in general.
Today's case is likely to continue for some time. However, it is important symbolically as family and colleagues of the victim testify. It's also important symbolically for Tunisia's Truth and Dignity Commission, which has faced some political pressure. 2 months ago, Parliament voted to not extend its mandate for transitional justice in what was a controversial vote where quorum was not achieved. The Commission has also faced difficulty in terms of getting access to archives. Today's judges also don't have access to those archives. However, for now, at least 30 of these cases similar to this have been referred to courts, and it's likely that more cases will be referred in the coming days.
In Ethiopia, opposition figure Andargachew Tsege was met by crowds of supporters after he was released from jail on Tuesday. He had been on death row after having been accused of plotting a coup, charges which he denied. Tsege is a British citizen, and the UK's voice was amongst those protesting his seizure from Yemen 4 years ago. Tsege was released along with more than 500 other prisoners. The latest lot of inmates given their freedom in a series of releases began in Ethiopia earlier this year. Well, over 90% of people at risk of catching Ebola in a recent outbreak have been vaccinated in the DR Congolese city of Mbandaka. More than 400 potential contacts received the vaccinations, and the World Health Organization hopes to get government approval to use experimental drugs to treat patients who have already contracted the virus. At least 12 people have died in the current outbreak, including one person over the weekend. The WHO says that it's hopeful about the progress of the response so far. Now, across much of Africa, colonialism remains a sensitive subject. In Senegal, some see symbols of French rule as harmless historical leftovers. Others say they are offensive. In St. Louis, campaigners behind the Faidherbe Must Fall lobby say a statue of French colonial general Louis Faidherbe is offensive and has no place in their city. Our correspondents report.
The Faidherbe Bridge, Central Square and statue are all landmarks in the northern Senegalese city of Saint-Louis. They're all named after a French governor, Louis Faidherbe, known for leading colonial expansion in Senegal. Critics say these landmarks wrongly portray him as a friendly settler and downplay the deadly military campaigns he orchestrated as he expanded French influence in West Africa. A statue of Faidherbe was erected in 1891, and for some, its continued presence is a disgrace.
To its governor, Faidherbe, Senegal is grateful. This statue should not be here. Faidherbe shot people, he humiliated people. He burned villages down in unquantifiable numbers. It is absolute humiliation to accept that the statue remains here, and to also accept this inscription saying that we're grateful to Faidherbe, which isn't true.
Located on a strip of land in the Senegal River, Saint-Louis is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. For local authorities, the Faidherbe statue and bridge are emblematic of the city and part of its history.
Senghor said colonization is a necessary evil, so this heritage is also a necessary evil. There's some good, there's some bad. Today, if Saint-Louis is known throughout the world, it's thanks to its colonial heritage. Today, Saint-Louis being visited by at least 10% of tourists staying in Senegal is thanks to its heritage.
Residents in Saint-Louis are divided on whether the statue should be removed.
The Faidherbe statue has its place here. It doesn't cause any harm and even helps attract people to come here to see Saint-Louis.
I think Faidherbe should fall because it reminds us of colonization.
When we say the Faidherbe bridge, the Faidherbe statue, when we talk about governance, for me it symbolizes Saint-Louis, not France.
In South Africa, the statue of another controversial colonial figure, Cecil Rhodes, drew strong criticism before finally being removed in 2015.
Well, that's it for now. Thanks for joining us. Take care.